The ghost village of Roanoke. The boat scraped against the sand as the sun dipped low over the Carolina coast. Governor John White stepped onto Roanoke Island, expecting to be greeted by the familiar sound of his people. Left footsteps, the clatter of tools building a new life in the new world, but the only sound waiting for him was the wind. The settlement stood silent. Houses he had helped plan were still there, but strangely altered. Some had been dismantled with an unsettling precision. Others were left half-finished, as if their builders had simply stood up mid-task and walked away. No bodies, no smoke, no sign of struggle, just emptiness. White moved deeper into the abandoned village, calling out names. No answer. The air felt thick, like a place that had been left alone far too long. Near the edge of the settlement, he found something that made his blood run cold. A single word carved into a weathered post. CROATOAN, no cross, no distress symbol. Just that strange word, familiar but out of place. It was the only message left behind by the 115 men, women, and children who had vanished without a trace. His daughter, his newborn granddaughter, his entire colony. White tried to imagine what had happened here. Had they moved willingly? Had they been forced? Had hunger, or war, or something far more sinister driven them away? The nearby forest loomed like a living presence, shadows shifting between the pines. The truth felt close, so close he could almost hear it whispering, but still impossibly out of reach. What happened to the lost colony of Roanoke? Why was the settlement carefully disassembled rather than destroyed? And why would the colonists leave a cryptic message but no sign of distress? More than 4 centuries later, archaeologists, historians, and linguists are still grappling with the same questions John White faced on that desolate shore. The disappearance of the first English settlement in America remains one of the oldest and most unsettling mysteries in the nation's history. This is the story of a colony that should have been the beginning of America, but instead became its first great disappearance. Who were the colonists? They were not soldiers. They were not criminals. They were not adventurers chasing fortune. The men and women of Roanoke were something far more fragile, far more ambitious. Ordinary English families willing to risk everything to build a new life on the edge of an unknown continent. Their leader, Governor John White, was a careful, deliberate man and artist. A surveyor, a planner. Many of the colonists knew him personally. They trusted him. And when Queen Elizabeth granted permission for a new settlement in the Americas, these 115 people stepped forward with a mixture of hope, desperation, and faith. Among them were skilled craftsmen, carpenters, metalworkers, brickmakers, people who knew how to shape the physical world around them. But there were also farmers who had never left their villages, widows seeking a fresh start, servants hoping to earn their freedom, and families carrying children barely old enough to walk. It was a community, a fragile, untested community, but one built with the promise of a better life. At the heart of that promise was Eleanor Dare, John White's daughter. She traveled with her husband Ananias in search of a future that England could not offer. And with her was a child who would become a symbol of hope across the Atlantic, Virginia Dare, the first English baby born in the New World. The colonists boarded their ships in 1587 with dreams more powerful than any weapon. They imagined fertile fields, peaceful agreements with the tribes who had lived here for centuries, and a thriving English presence that would secure their place in history. But history rarely bends toward hope. Many of them had little understanding of the world they were entering. To them, the new world was a blank canvas, unmapped and untouched. But the reality was a land already shaped by powerful nations, the Algonquin-speaking tribes, the Croatan, people of Hatteras, the Secatan, the Roanoke, and many others whose histories stretched back generations before England even imagined crossing an ocean. These were not empty lands. They were complex, interconnected societies with alliances, rivalries, diplomacy, and war. The English colonists, unknowingly, walked into a world already in motion. They carried tools and seeds and dreams, but they also carried a dangerous ignorance, one that would challenge every assumption they brought with them. What drove these families to risk starvation, storms, and the unknown dangers of a continent thousands of miles from home? And how much did they truly understand about the land where they hoped to begin again? As Roanoke's story unfolds, one truth becomes clear. They were not just colonists. They were pioneers, standing on the edge of a world that neither welcomed them nor forgave mistakes. The journey to the New World. The journey began with the creaking of wooden hulls and the smell of salt on the wind. 3 ships, the Lion, the Roebuck, and a small pinnace set sail from England in the spring of 1587, carrying the fate of the Roanoke colony across a restless ocean. For many of the passengers, this was their first time leaving home. The decks were cramped, crowded with crates of supplies, tools, barrels of fresh water, and the fragile hopes of 115 souls. Families slept, pressed together, rocked constantly by the movement of the sea. The cold bit through thin wool blankets at night, and the days were filled with unpredictable storms that made even the strongest knees buckle. Food was rationed. Fresh water was guarded like treasure. Sickness spread through the lower decks, carried by damp air and exhaustion. Yet every hardship seemed worth enduring. Across the sea waited a new beginning. The Atlantic crossing of the 16th century was not a straight line, but a wandering path determined by wind, currents, and the stubborn will of the ship's master. The voyage could take 8 weeks, or 16. Storms could tear sails to ribbons. Calm seas could trap the ships in place for days, leaving passengers staring at an endless horizon of blue that never moved. Still, the colonists clung to their purpose. They read letters from home. They whispered about the fertile lands described by earlier explorers. They imagined the wooden houses they would build, the fields they would plant, the peaceful alliances they hoped to form with indigenous tribes. But beneath that optimism, a shadow followed them. The fleet's navigator, Simon Fernandes, was known for his skill but also for his temper and unpredictable decisions. Some whispered that he had his own agenda. Others feared he would push the expedition toward danger. Yet no one could deny that he knew the Atlantic better than most men alive. The colonists had no choice but to trust him. Weeks into the voyage, storms battered the ships. Lightning cracked across the sky. Waves slammed against the hulls, throwing passengers into walls and sending supplies tumbling. In the chaos, a single fear echoed through the darkness. Ships could be lost, separated, or smashed to pieces before ever reaching land. But the colony survived. Exhausted, hungry, and shaken, the passengers finally saw the outline of the North American coast. The sight of land after so many weeks of endless water brought tears to the eyes of more than one traveler. Yet the relief was short. Instead of landing in the Chesapeake Bay as originally planned, Fernandes forced the fleet toward Roanoke Island, a site of a previous, failed colony. John White protested. He demanded they follow the plan, but Fernandes refused. He insisted on leaving the settlers at Roanoke, and then departed almost immediately, taking the ships on any hope of returning to England along with him. The colonists, abandoned on a familiar but deeply troubled island, were left to face a land they barely understood, with dwindling supplies, rising uncertainty, and the heavy realization that their future was no longer in their own hands. What awaited them in the forests beyond the shore, and what debts or enemies from the past would return to haunt this new colony? When the colonists first stepped onto Roanoke Island, the air was still and heavy, as if the land itself was holding its breath. The remnants of the previous English settlement, abandoned 2 years earlier, lay scattered across the shoreline. Rotten wooden posts, collapsed shelters, tools left to rust, and a silence that raised more questions than answers. But the new settlers had little time for reflection. They needed shelter, they needed food, and they needed hope. John White immediately organized the rebuilding effort. Men cut down cypress and cedar trees, shaping them into the skeletons of new houses. Others dug wells, repaired palisades, and cleared land for gardens. Women prepared meals around open fires and tended to the children who, for the first time, walked barefoot on American soil. Each hammer strike, each plank raised, felt like a declaration. We will succeed where the others failed. For a moment, optimism took root. The colonists found that some of the land was fertile, the fishing plentiful, and the forests rich with game. They imagined a stable community rising from the ruins, a future where Roanoke would become England's foothold in the New World. But beneath that fragile hope lay unresolved tensions, ghosts from the past that refused to stay buried. 2 years earlier, English soldiers stationed on Roanoke had clashed violently with the CROATAN and Assimilation tribes. Villages were burned, leaders were killed. Trust had been shattered long before the families of 1587 arrived. The new colonists didn't know the full story, but the tribes remembered everything. At first, encounters were cautious but peaceful. A few Algonquin-speaking hunters approached the settlement with curiosity. It couldn't. Within days, scouts reported that many villages nearby were empty, abandoned at the news of the colony's return. Rumors spread that Englishmen had been spotted near burned fields, reminders of earlier violence. And one evening, a colonist named George Howe wandered alone along the shoreline to catch crabs, and never returned. When a search party found him the next morning, his body lay in the reeds, killed by warriors from a tribe who had suffered under the previous English occupation. They had not attacked the colony itself, but the message was unmistakable. The land remembers, and so do its people. Fear rippled through the settlement. The palisades were reinforced. Night watches doubled. Families huddled inside half-finished homes, listening to the forest for footsteps that never came. Still, John White tried to restore trust. He sent envoys to the Croatan people on nearby Hatteras, island-old allies of the English who had not participated in the violence. The Croatan welcomed them, insisting they wanted peace. Their chief Manteo, a friend of the English since earlier voyages, asked for cooperation, not conflict. Through him, the colonists caught a glimpse of a better path, a chance at survival through diplomacy rather than force. But tension remained. Supplies ran low. Winter crept closer. And every night the dense forests around Roanoke whispered reminders that the colony was isolated, vulnerable, and profoundly unprepared. As hope and fear battled within the settlement's fragile walls, one grim reality grew impossible to ignore. Roanoke's survival depended on decisions that would soon push the colony toward its greatest turning point and its greatest mystery. rising tensions, and the call to London. Why John White leaves. As summer deepened on Roanoke Island, the colony's thin layer of optimism began to crack. Supplies were dwindling faster than expected. The settlers had counted on resupply ships arriving within months, but no sails appeared on the horizon. Every day without news tightened the knot of anxiety within the Palisades. Food became the central crisis. The soil was fertile, but planting had begun too late. Their stores, already limited when they left England, were shrinking with each passing week. Hunting offered only modest relief, and tensions with nearby tribes made venturing far from the settlement dangerous. The colonists were caught between two impossible choices: stay within the walls and starve, or leave them and risk the danger of a land where old grievances still burned. John White felt the pressure more than anyone. As governor, every hungry child felt like a personal failure. Every desperate request for help echoed louder in his mind. But as conditions worsened, the colonists began to look to him not only for guidance, but for answers he didn't have. One of the most urgent problems was the fragile alliance with the Croatan people. Mateo, their chief and longtime friend of the English, pleaded for restraint, caution, and understanding. But White knew alliances were only as strong as the needs behind them, and hunger made everyone more volatile. Raids on gardens, accusations of theft, and misunderstandings sparked tension on both sides. Even with Mateo's mediation, trust was eroding. Then came the incident that changed everything. A misunderstanding led a small group of colonists to launch an attack on a nearby village, believing it belonged to those responsible for George Howe's death. But they were wrong. The village was Croatan friends, not enemies. Though the attack caused little damage, the betrayal strained relations to the breaking point. White realized the truth with painful clarity. The colony could not survive without a stable alliance, and that alliance was slipping away. Then, the final blow arrived. The fishermen and sailors who had brought the colonists across the Atlantic refused to stay until more supplies could be gathered. They wanted to leave. Storm season was approaching, and they feared being trapped in the Outer Banks, a notoriously dangerous stretch of water. The settlers gathered in a tense meeting within the palisade walls. Many were pale with hunger, exhausted by months of fear and uncertainty. Their decision was unanimous and desperate. John White must return to England. He must secure supplies, food, tools, weapons, and return as quickly as possible. White resisted. He didn't want to leave his daughter Eleanor. He didn't want to abandon his newborn granddaughter, Virginia Dare, their first English child born in the New World. The idea of leaving them on this precarious island haunted him. But the colony had no other choice. They needed a representative, a leader who could plead their case before investors and the crown. And no one held more credibility than their governor. White finally agreed. Before departing, he instructed the colonists on the secret signal that would reveal their fate upon his return. They were to carve the name of their new destination if they moved. And if they were in danger, mortal danger, they must carve a cross beside it. On a warm August day in 1587, White boarded the ship that would carry him back across the Atlantic. As the vessel drifted away from the shore, he watched the colony shrink into a thin line of trees and smoke. Eleanor waved from the beach, holding little Virginia in her arms. White promised he would return quickly. But storms, politics, war with Spain, and countless delays awaited him in England. The colony's window for survival was narrowing, and the world across the ocean was about to forget Roanoke entirely. By the time John White returned 3 years later, nothing would be the same. Nothing would be there at all. The impossible return, war, delay, and the long silence. When John White arrived back in England in late 1587, he expected to reload, reorganize, and return within weeks. The colony at Roanoke needed him. His daughter needed him. His infant granddaughter Virginia Dare depended on him for survival. Every hour that passed felt like a tightening rope pulling at his conscience. But the world he returned to was already burning. England was on the brink of war with Spain. The threat of the Spanish Armada hung over the country like a thundercloud ready to break. Ships were no longer tools of exploration, they were instruments of national survival. Every seaworthy vessel was seized by the crown, outfitted for battle, and forbidden from sailing anywhere except into the coming storm of war. White begged for permission to return. He pleaded with officials, merchants, private investors, anyone with a ship. But the answer was always the same: not now. England needs every ship. Worse still, rumors began to circulate that Spanish fleets patrolled the Atlantic, sinking or capturing any English vessel attempting to reach the New World. The route to Roanoke had become a battlefield. White's frustration grew into anguish. Every day he imagined the colony running out of food. He imagined the palisade weakened by weather and conflict. He imagined his daughter Eleanor staring toward the empty ocean, waiting for a father who could not come. During this time, an opportunity seemed to appear. Too small. Privately owned vessels, the Hopewell and the Moonlight, were willing to attempt the crossing. They were tiny, barely seaworthy, and poorly armed, but they were the only chance White had. He accepted, knowing the risks. The voyage began, and quickly collapsed into disaster. Barely out of England's waters, the crews encountered French privateers. A violent skirmish erupted. Cannons roared, masts splintered, men screamed, and within minutes the fight was lost. Both English ships were boarded, stripped of cargo, and sent limping back toward England with nothing but humiliation. White returned home, again empty-handed, powerless, his hope torn apart by the brutal reality of transatlantic politics. Months passed, then a year, then two. The war intensified. England triumphed over the Spanish Armada in 1588, but even victory brought no relief. Shipyards were devastated, resources drained, and returning vessels were in pieces. Rebuilding the fleet took too much time. White lived each day in dread, imagining the colony shrinking into silence. He wrote letters. He begged for updates from sailors, merchants, navigators, anyone who had sailed west. But no news came. Roanoke was disappearing from England's priorities. Settlers were dying. And the longer White waited, the more he feared that he was not trying to return to a living colony, but to a graveyard. Finally, in 1590, after nearly 3 unbearable years, Sir Walter Raleigh granted permission for White to join a fleet heading to the Caribbean. It wasn't a rescue mission, it was a privateering mission, but it would at least sail close enough for White to detour toward Roanoke. It wasn't the noble return he had imagined, but it was a return. White boarded the ship with a heart full of fear. He knew that whatever waited for him on Roanoke Island, whether his family was alive or dead, would define the rest of his life. As the English coast faded behind him, one question consumed him. Was he already too late? The return to Roanoke, silence, ashes, and the word carved in wood. When John White finally stepped onto the shores of Roanoke again, after 3 long years trapped by storms, war, and political delays, he expected to hear something, anything. A shout, a cry, a child's laughter carried by the wind. Instead, there was only silence. A silence so heavy that even the waves seemed afraid to break it. White moved forward, heart pounding, his men behind him in a tense formation. The village appeared in the distance, but something was wrong. The first detail struck him like a blow. The palisades he had ordered to be built were intact, yet the gate was open. Not broken, simply open, as if the inhabitants had left in a hurry, expecting to return. Inside the settlement, the emptiness was overwhelming. No bodies, no signs of struggle, no blood, tools scattered, but not destroyed. Houses partially dismantled, as if the inhabitants had taken some parts with them, but not enough to suggest a full evacuation. It felt less like a tragedy and more like a disappearance. Methodical, deliberate, and chilling. Then came the moment that would define the legend forever. On a large post, carved deeply into the wood, a single word, CROATOAN. No sign of distress, no symbol of danger. No cross burned into a tree, the agreed-upon signal if the colonists left under threat. Just one word, a direction, perhaps, a clue, or a warning. White's stomach twisted. Croatan was the name of an island south of Roanoke, home to the friendly Croatan nation. The colonists had discussed going there if things turned difficult. But why leave no further message? Why dismantle homes? Why move as a group? As White searched for answers, he found one last, haunting detail. On a nearby tree, 3 faint, almost invisible letters. Crow. Were they unfinished? A rushed message interrupted. Or simply weathered with time? The men whispered behind him, some claiming spirits haunted the island, others insisting the Spanish had struck. But White knew only one truth. Roanoke was empty. Utterly, impossibly, inexplicably empty. And the people he left behind, including his daughter Eleanor and his granddaughter Virginia, the first English child born in America, were nowhere to be found. Not dead, not alive, just gone. The mystery had begun. The Famine Theory. Hunger is the silent executioner. Hunger changes people. It reshapes decisions, erodes trust, and pushes entire communities toward desperate choices they would never consider in ordinary times. When historians look at Roanoke, the simplest explanation may also be the darkest one. From the moment the colonists arrived, they were fighting against an unforgiving environment. The soil was poor, the crops failed repeatedly. Local alliances shifted from fragile cooperation to open hostility, and the supply ships that were supposed to bring relief never came. Not in the first year, not in the second, not ever. Starvation doesn't strike suddenly. It creeps in slowly, in stages. First, the rationing, then the substitution, then the panic. By the time John White left for England to secure more provisions, the colony was already teetering on the edge. Food shortages were constant. Drought records from tree rings show the region was experiencing one of the worst dry spells in centuries. Water was scarce. Hunting became nearly impossible. Even friendly tribes struggled to survive. Hunger isolates people. It forces them to choose between staying and leaving. For the Roanoke colonists, staying meant death. Leaving even into the unknown might have meant hope. Some experts believe the settlers dismantled parts of their homes because they needed the wood to build boats, not to escape to Europe, but to push deeper inland or toward friendlier territory in search of food. Others think they followed the Croatan people, who had access to better resources and stronger networks. But the grim reality is that famine rarely ends in clean relocations. It ends in chaos. It ends in fractures. It ends in disappearances. A starving colony might split into factions, some refusing to abandon the settlement, others fleeing for survival. others simply dying along the way. And when death comes quietly, no battle, no disease, no survivors to tell the story, it leaves behind exactly what John White found: a settlement emptied not by violence, but by the slow, suffocating pressure of starvation. No screams, no signs of struggle, just silence, and a single carved word that might have been the colonists' final attempt to leave a trace before the hunger swallowed them entirely. In this version of the mystery, the people of Roanoke didn't vanish into legend. They were consumed by the oldest force on Earth, and the word CROATOAN wasn't a message of hope. It was the last direction a desperate, starving community managed to leave before everything else simply faded away. The Spanish shadow, a hidden enemy in the New World. When John White stared at the abandoned village, many theories came to mind. Hunger, flight, native alliances, but there was one fear no Englishman dared say too loudly: Spain. The superpower of the 16th century, the empire with the strongest navy, the deepest pockets, and orders from the crown to wipe English settlements off the map. To Spain, Roanoke wasn't a colony, it was an insult. At the time, England and Spain were locked in a bitter political and religious conflict. Privateers like Sir Francis Drake were raiding Spanish treasure fleets. Evidence shows that Spanish agents knew Roanoke existed. Maps in Madrid marked the coastline. Reports from spies detailed English activity. And the Spanish governor in Florida had a clear mission: locate and destroy every unauthorized settlement. So, did they find Roanoke? Some historians believe so. Spanish forces were ruthless. They had already wiped out French colonies with brutal efficiency. If they reached Roanoke, the outcome would have been swift and merciless. No mercy, no survivors, no trace. But here's the catch: Spain kept meticulous records. If they destroyed Roanoke, where are the documents? Why is there not a single reference to a victory? Spanish archives remember every triumph, except this one. Yet silence can be strategic. A secret operation? A warning erased from paper but delivered through fear. Archaeologists have also uncovered reports of Spanish scouting missions in the exact region during that period. Ships seen offshore, soldiers moving along the outer banks, shadows slipping through forests long before John White returned. The theory grows darker when imagining the colonists' final hours. No inscription carved calmly into wood. No migration toward CROATOAN, only a sudden, violent encounter that left no time for messages or survivors. Still, the site tells another story. No burned structures, no scattered skeletons, no signs of a massacre. If Spain struck, they erased everything with clinical precision, or the attack never happened at all. The Spanish shadow lingers because it fits the era. It fits the politics. It fits the global chessboard of empires fighting for dominance. But like every theory tied to Roanoke, it holds just enough truth to be terrifying and just enough doubt to remain unsolved. Were the colonists swallowed by famine, or eliminated by the most powerful empire on Earth? Roanoke leaves us with no answers, only suspicions, scattered like footprints in the sand. The native assimilation theory: survival through integration. When investigators stood before the empty village of Roanoke, one detail remained etched into a weathered post: CROATOAN. No signs of struggle, no panic, no blood. Just a single word, a direction, a clue, almost a farewell. To many historians, this wasn't a mystery, it was a message. The CROATOAN were not strangers to the colonists. They were allies. They spoke with them, traded with them, helped them survive those fragile early months. And among all native nations in the region, only the CROATOAN had consistently shown goodwill. This is where one of the most compelling theories begins. Not with disappearance, but with assimilation. Imagine the colonists, after years without resupply, facing the slow death of isolation, their crops failing, tools breaking, illness spreading, children growing up with no ships on the horizon, no help, no future. What if, instead of dying, they adapted? Many native communities had a long tradition of adopting outsiders, stragglers, castaways, survivors, people who brought new skills, new knowledge, and who, in turn, learned new ways of living. Roanoke settlers were farmers, blacksmiths, carpenters, useful, valuable. Some early encounters had been tense, but with the CROATOAN, it was different. There was trust, there was communication, there was a path forward. And then there are the stories. Whispers passed through centuries. Reports from later English settlers described native individuals with gray eyes, unusual features, or English-style clothing. Legends told of villages where children spoke fragments of English. Tribal oral traditions referenced ancestors who came from the sea, who lived differently, who carried old tools of iron. None of this is definitive proof, but it is smoke rising from a fire we can't quite see. Then there's the archaeological trail. On Hatteras Island, the heart of CROATOAN territory, researchers have uncovered European artifacts dated exactly to the Roanoke period. A hilt of a rapier, a copper ring altered for native wear, fragments of writing tablets, tools crafted in English style but repaired with native techniques, not buried in a settlement destroyed by war, not scattered as relics of refugees, but integrated, woven into daily life. as if the colonists lived long enough to adapt, trade, and transform. If the colonists truly joined the CROATOAN, it would explain everything. No violence, no panic, no mass graves. Just a gradual shift from English identity to native survival. In a way, the lost colony might not be lost at all. It may have simply changed form, absorbed into a thriving culture, hidden in plain sight. But the questions linger. Did all the colonists assimilate? Or only a few? Did they remain with the CROATOAN forever? Or scatter among different tribes? And if they lived, why did no one return to meet John White when he came back? Roanoke's greatest secret may not be death, but transformation. The Dare Stone mystery, archaeological hope, or elaborate hoax. In the decades after Roanoke's disappearance, one question haunted historians, explorers, and dreamers alike. Was there ever a true message left behind? A sign, a confession, a final cry for help? And then, in 1937, a stone emerged from the forests of North Carolina. A stone carved with words that claimed to speak directly from the heart of the lost colony. It became known as the Dare Stone. The inscription, rough yet deliberate, bore a chilling message. It was allegedly written by Eleanor Dare, daughter of Governor John White and mother of Virginia Dare, the first English child born on American soil. The stone told a story of suffering, of sickness, of death. It claimed that many colonists had been killed by hostile groups, that only a few survived. That Eleanor herself carved this message as both a warning and a plea. For a moment, it felt like Roanoke had finally spoken. Archaeologists, historians, and journalists rushed to investigate. The language on the stone seemed archaic, but plausibly Elizabethan. The wear on the rock suggested age. Even the location fit the region where desperate colonists might have fled. The first Dare Stone captivated America, but then more stones appeared. Too many, too perfect, too convenient. Suddenly, what had felt like a genuine artifact began to smell of deception. Many of the later stones were exposed as forgeries, hoaxes created to exploit public fascination. Sensational, profitable, but false. And because of those forgeries, the original Dare Stone was thrown into doubt. Academic trust collapsed. Institutions backed away. The mystery turned from archaeological breakthrough to embarrassment. But here is where the story takes a twist. Recent re-examinations have cast doubt on the dismissal itself. Some linguists argue that the phrasing and grammar on the first stone genuinely resemble 16th century English. Geologists claim the weathering patterns match natural aging. No definitive modern carving marks have been found. If the first Dare Stone was the real one, and the later stones were hoaxes, then the message might still be authentic, and its content changes everything. It describes a split among the colonists, a desperate migration inland, a tragedy that claimed over half their number, survivors taken in by native communities, a path that aligns eerily well with the Assimilation Theory, and with oral histories from tribes in the region. So the Dare Stone sits at the crossroads of truth and deceit. Is it a final testimony from Eleanor Dare, one of the most important archaeological clues in early American history? Or is it the most skillful historical hoax ever created? Even today, experts remain divided. The stone may be a priceless relic, or it may be nothing more than a clever lie. But its mystery keeps Roanoke alive. Because if Eleanor Dare really carved those words, then the colonists were not lost. They were hunted, desperate, wandering until only a fragment of their story could be etched in stone. What if the colony was never lost? Modern science reopens the case for centuries. Roanoke has been remembered as a disappearance, a vanishing act, a ghost story, a riddle carved into a single word on a wooden post. But what if the biggest mistake historians ever made was assuming that the colony was lost at all? Modern science, DNA analysis, advanced archaeology, satellite imaging, and tribal oral history is forcing a radical question. What if the colonists survived, and we simply never learned where they went? It begins with the land itself. When researchers analyzed soil, pollen, and water patterns from Roanoke and Croatoan Island, they found something striking. A long-term habitation signature, but not exactly where the English settlement once stood. It suggested movement, a shift, people leaving, but not dying. Then came the archaeological evidence. Across North Carolina, far from the coast, teams uncovered European objects that predate Jamestown, yet were repaired using native techniques. A sword hilt reforged with indigenous metal, fragments of English pottery fired in native-style kilns, a writing tablet with traces of charcoal, buried in a village that had no contact with England. None of these objects were traded. They were used, integrated into daily life. The pattern was unmistakable. Someone from Roanoke, or several someones, survived long enough to live in a new community, or multiple communities. Then came the DNA studies. Several native tribes in the region, particularly the Lumbee, have long claimed descent from the lost colony. And in genealogical studies, geneticists found anomalies, lineages with unmistakable indicators of early European ancestry, but not French, not Spanish, not Scandinavian, English. From the right period, from the right region of England. It doesn't prove everything. DNA can be distorted, erased, or misread, but it adds a new voice to the story, saying, maybe the colonists didn't vanish. Maybe they became something else. And then, something even more compelling. In some tribal oral histories, there are references to the people who came from the sea, who brought iron tools, who had strange clothing, who joined the villages during a time of famine and war. These stories were recorded long before Roanoke became a headline mystery, long before hoaxes and theories, long before modern obsession. They are quiet testimonies, calm, matter-of-fact, almost casual. In one account, a tribal leader described ancestors who lived differently from others and knew how to write, an attribute entirely foreign to native societies of the 1500s. If these accounts are true, then the lost colony may have found something far more valuable than rescue, a way to survive, not by waiting for ships that never came, not by clinging to an identity doomed by isolation, but by adapting, merging, becoming part of the land that gave them no other choice. In this version of history, the lost colony wasn't lost. It transformed, its legacy scattered into families, stories, bloodlines, objects, and memories that never made it back to England. Maybe John White didn't find them, because he was looking for English settlers, and by then, they were no longer English. Survival simulations. What modern analysis says really happened today. The mystery of Roanoke is no longer just a historical puzzle. It has become a scientific model, a case study used by survival experts, anthropologists, climatologists, and even military analysts. And when these experts run simulations, they all arrive at the same chilling conclusion. The colony's disappearance wasn't a single event. It was a chain reaction, a slow-motion collapse shaped by environment, politics, and human limits. Let's start with the climate. Modern tree ring analysis, a highly precise science, called dendrochronology, reveals that Roanoke was founded during the worst drought in 800 years. Food was scarce, crops failed. Local tribes were already struggling to survive. Any simulation of the colony's odds under these conditions reaches the same outcome. Starvation becomes inevitable within months. But starvation alone doesn't erase 115 people. Something else was happening. Military survival experts looked at the colonists' supply lists, skills, and defensive capabilities. They found that Roanoke, unlike later colonies, had almost no soldiers, no fortifications, and very limited weapons. They were craftsmen, families, farmers, not fighters. So when simulations added conflict, even small localized disputes with surrounding tribes, the survival probability dropped below 20%. Yet even that doesn't explain the total disappearance. So researchers ran hybrid models. Drought plus conflict plus resource exhaustion plus isolation, and suddenly, the mystery began to clear. In every advanced simulation, the colonists didn't die all at once. They fragmented. Small groups broke away to seek help. Some moved toward Croatan Island, others followed rivers inland. Some sought refuge with friendly tribes. A few attempted to rebuild camps deeper in the forests, where food and fresh water were more abundant. The colony didn't vanish. It splintered, and splintered groups leave no centralized archaeological footprint. Then comes the most fascinating outcome. Assimilation becomes the dominant survival path in nearly every realistic simulation. Alone, starving, unequipped, their best hope wasn't fighting or fleeing. It was joining the people who knew the land. Anthropological models show that in times of crisis, mixed communities form naturally. Knowledge is exchanged, tools are shared, skills blend, cultures merge. By the second year, simulations indicate that any remaining English identity would be diluted, overwhelmed by the necessity to adapt to native lifestyles. By the fourth year, the chances of the colonists still existing as a coherent English community drop to near zero. But the chances of them surviving as part of native communities rise above 60%. And here is the stunning part. When genetic, linguistic, and archaeological anomalies from the region are added into the model, objects older than Jamestown, non-native surnames, unexpected European ancestry, the simulation's confidence level rises dramatically. Assimilation becomes the most statistically likely real-world outcome. Not massacre, not mass starvation, not a supernatural disappearance, but a gradual transformation. A colony dissolving into the world around it, leaving behind only fragments for future generations to decode. Modern analysis delivers a final message. Roanoke is not a ghost story, it's a survival story. One where the colonists did exactly what humans have always done when the world closes in. They adapted. They changed. They endured, but not in the way England expected. The lost colony may never have been lost. We simply didn't know how to look for what it became. The national weight of a foundational mystery. Every nation has a defining story, a moment that shapes its identity, its fears, its hopes. A moment so deeply woven into the fabric of its culture that it becomes more than history. It becomes mythology. For the United States, Roanoke is that story. Long before the Revolution, long before the frontier, long before the dream of a nation was even imaginable, there was this fragile settlement on the edge of a continent. 115 souls reaching into the unknown, hoping to build the first English foothold in the New World. And then, they vanished. That disappearance, more than any military victory or royal charter, became America's first great mystery, a riddle that predated the nation itself. A question older than the idea of America. Generations grew up with it. Teachers told it in classrooms. Writers reimagined it. Politicians invoked it. For a young country searching for meaning, Roanoke became a symbol, a story that said, "We began not with certainty, but with unanswered questions." It became a mirror for the American psyche. In the colonial era, Roanoke symbolized danger, a warning of the continent's harshness. In the 19th century, it symbolized romance, a tale of lost civilization blending into the wilderness. In the early 20th century, during the golden age of archaeology, it symbolized curiosity, the thrill of a historical puzzle waiting to be solved. And today, in the digital age, it represents something deeper, the fear that even in a world overloaded with information, some truths remain forever out of reach. The weight of this mystery is cultural, emotional, almost spiritual. For many Americans, Roanoke is not just about what happened, it's about what could happen. It's about fragility, about the thin line between survival and disappearance, about the unknown that still lurks beneath the surface of history. It's a reminder that the United States began not with triumph, but with uncertainty. Not with clarity, but with a question that has echoed for more than 4 centuries. And that question has shaped how Americans see their past. Bold, uncertain, unfinished, Roanoke became a national myth, not because it was lost, but because it was never fully found. A founding riddle, etched into the origins of a country built on exploration, risk, and reinvention. The lost colony marks the beginning of an identity, one that embraces mystery as part of the American story. And even now, the weight of that mystery remains, not as a burden, but as a legacy. Reflection. Why Roanoke still haunts us. Roanoke endures because it sits at the crossroads of 2 powerful forces. What we know, and what we fear we never will. In a world mapped by satellites, scanned by algorithms, and archived down to the smallest detail, Roanoke remains a wound history cannot close. A reminder that even the deepest records have shadows. That even the greatest nations begin with questions, not answers. We are drawn to Roanoke because it feels personal. It speaks to the fear of being forgotten, and the hope that even in disappearance, a legacy remains. Maybe the colonists died. Maybe they survived. Maybe they blended into the land and left traces and bloodlines, artifacts, and memories that still breathe today. But the truth is this: Roanoke fascinates us because it challenges our belief that the past is fixed, knowable, secure. It whispers that history is alive, fluid, fragile, and forever incomplete. And that mystery, that spark of uncertainty, is what keeps the lost colony from fading into dust. It is not just a historical puzzle. It is a mirror, one that reflects who we were, who we are, and who we might become. And now, a final thought for you watching. Stories like Roanoke survive because people like you keep them alive. People who are curious, thoughtful, and willing to explore the hidden corners of history. So if this journey moved you, if it left you with questions, or if you simply want more rare, authentic stories buried beneath America's surface, take a moment to support this work. A like helps the story reach more curious minds. A comment keeps the mystery alive. And subscribing ensures you never miss the next chapter in America's hidden past. Because here, on Best Hidden America, every mystery is a doorway, and we've only just begun opening them.